Did I hear a good morning? I am so thrilled at the amount of energy that we've had in these last couple days. It's been fantastic. Like, can you feel it? Can you feel it in the sessions? It's been amazing. And for those of you who have been in some of the placemaking, social determinants of health, how to do 502 packaging, it has been fantastic. And so thanks for the time you're putting in, but thanks also for the opportunity for us to do that work with you. It's been great. Yesterday's sessions were really fun for me. Building up rural is an extraordinarily important thing for our community, and I think we're doing a good job. Are my Utah vets in the house? I didn't think so, because the bar ran out of bourbon last night, and you guys were rolling around on the floor in the lobby when I walked by at about midnight. So I didn't think, if I'd seen a raised hand, I would have known that America breeds some of the strongest and best vets we can ever have. Thank you to all of you who sang happy birthday to my daughter last night on the bus, on all 3 buses. She's a bit of an extrovert, so Dad got some big points for that one. That was really special to me and to my board members from southern states who were then frozen and in the lobby drinking chowder and hot cocoa to get ready for the night and thaw out. Thank you guys as well for being on the tour. We have a fantastic lineup today. You're going to get an opportunity to hear from Rural Studio from Alabama, from our extraordinary research division, Lance George, and all kinds of good stuff. I do want to take a moment to remind all of us that we're getting fantastic help and service from all kinds of folks, from you and me and everyone, but there are also people who work here in the everyday jobs of service and running a service economy. And so if you get a chance to thank the folks who are serving at your tables and other things like that, please take a minute to do that. That is as important a work as anything we're doing, and we're thankful and grateful for what they do. All right, so on to the good stuff. We start this morning with a person who's been a banker for about 30 years with Wells Fargo and its legacy companies, managing philanthropic relationships for an extraordinary range of affordable housing organizations. It is a thrill for me to be up here talking about Connie Wright, who has, from my very first day, which you guys know was only about a year ago, has been right there by our side, talking us through how we do our organizational work, how we can reach out. She's introduced us to other partners. Several of you have relationships already with her, and it is fantastic to note that Connie has graciously offered to join the HAC board. Let's hear it for that. Her leadership is going to be awesome. She's helping our industry connect with housing counseling, policy advocacy and research, affordable housing development in rural and urban geographies. That's all right. We'll bring you more and more to the rural. I know. You got to love all your children. Speaking of, she's got 2 fantastic kids. High energy daughter, an extraordinary athlete for a son that we've talked about more than anything. Family to both of us is a really important thing, and so I love that piece of it. She's got 40+ organizations, 400 members within those that she's been touching in this time, bringing us together. You've been doing disaster preparedness work, recovery strategies, and the list goes on. Prior to her time in her current role, she was doing a lot with mid-tier, smaller organizations in rural places. She comes from the right place, a Georgia person with Alabama roots. What do we say about that? Roll Tide. You'll hear that from her. Hey, look, forget all the rest of these notes. I just want to say that this is a fantastic partner with a great history in our industry and someone who's dear to us and has joined us in a big, big way. I want to introduce to you one of our best sponsors, Wells Fargo, and their representative, Connie Wright.
Wow, David, I'm going to have to try to live up to that. Thank you for that great introduction. As David said, I am with Wells Fargo. I'm the Assistant Director for the Housing Philanthropic Team for the Foundation. And the work that we do is specific to sustainable, affordable housing. So in my day job, I work with and manage the relationships for all of our affordable housing national relationships. I've been with the foundation for, since 2014. And as David said, in my former work, I was a community development officer in Georgia. I was responsible for the entire state, with the exception of Atlanta. And so, rural markets, mid-tier and small, are really near and dear to my heart. And so when I joined the foundation at the national level, what I noted right away in our portfolio was that there was not much in terms of a representation at the national level as it related to rural. And so right away, I began to look for those organizations that sort of led the way, that are thought leaders in that space, and HAC was our very first organization to join our portfolio in the rural space. I'm very, very thankful for the work and the support and the guidance that they gave us early on with the leadership of Moises, and I am thrilled to be looking forward to a great future opportunity for significant, impactful collaboration with David at the helm. And so this organization really is very key to our strategy around rural, and certainly the lift continues to be heavy in that space. But do know that Wells Fargo is committed to the work. We continue to be a top leader in terms of USDA lending throughout the country. We have the majority of our obviously, in the middle of the country, we have significant presence throughout that area, and I want to recognize one of my key partners from South Dakota, Lisa Jarding, if you could just stand up. She is a rock star and is located in South Dakota, and really has been she's been very instrumental for me internally in sort of guiding our strategic direction. And so we will continue to move forward. In addition to being a USDA lender, we also have been dedicated to continuing to advance the work around rural. As I indicated, HAC was first, but we also partner with Rural LISC. We partner with NeighborWorks. We partner with FAHI in the Appalachia area. And we will continue to do that work in any number of ways, whether it is technical assistance, advancing programs, policy and advocacy, which is really, really important right now. And so I would just say that I would want to end by just reiterating that we are committed, that the work we recognize to be very, very important, particularly in this current environment, to look for ways to leverage resources. When I first started the work in Georgia, I attended a meeting, one of my very first, and I was from Atlanta, and I went in to meet with some folks, and they were trying to solve for a problem, and they talked about, I shared with them, well, in Atlanta, this is the way we do this. And so right away, at our first break, a gentleman pulled me to the side. He said, listen, dear, if you want to succeed in your job, don't ever tell us about what Atlanta is doing again. We don't want to hear that. And so while I did interject and offer that information, I never said it was from Atlanta. I just would say best practices, because honestly, there are certain issues and priorities that cuts across all of our country. Affordable housing, as it relates, affordable housing, when you think about affordability and inventory and accessibility, to some varying degree, that is an issue across the country. And so it is important to us to work with organizations like you in the room, like political figures in the room. Obviously, it is important for us to be able to tell our story effectively and gain them as supporters. And so the work is yet to be done. We are looking forward to a great 2019. David was very persistent in getting me on the board. At first when he came, I said, David, I'm so busy. I would love to do it, but I want to be there. I want to be present to support your organization, and I'm afraid that I won't be able to do it. But quietly, as you know, David, he's quiet, but he's just stealthy. and persistent. And so he finally convinced me to do that. And so at the end of the day, thrilled to be a part of this work from the board perspective, thrilled to support this organization as well as all of you in the room from a philanthropic position, and looking forward to 2019. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, Connie. I've been accused of a lot of things. Quiet. It's never been one. So we have a lot of places to take that fight that you're describing, Connie, and putting together a collection of folks across the country who can advocate for it from the ground is extraordinarily important. We need a community of practice. We are not a well-represented organization or a community in DC. Rural America needs voices. You guys are those voices. Affordable housing folks and families who need that, they need your voices here. One way we can do that is continue our conversations with folks who are here in elected office. So this morning we got a fighter in the room. Born and raised in Las Vegas, Senator Catherine Cortez Masto spent her career fighting for Nevada's working families. 2 terms as Attorney General of Nevada before coming here, and in November 2016, the senator became the first Latina ever elected to the U.S. Senate. Let's give it a little applause for progress. We got a long way to go on that front. I'm looking forward to years to come where we're not talking about first electeds representing important constituencies for us and others across the country. That's not okay. It is a thrill to be here and to be connected with a senator who could accomplish that. But let's continue to push. We got a lot of progress to make. As you may know, she sits on 6 Senate committees. I thought I sent late night emails. I can't imagine that workload. Running back and forth, including banking, housing, and urban affairs. We need a rural affairs committee. Maybe next time, Senator. Look, so we track people really closely across the country who are doing work on this stuff. We're taking in as much media and news feeds as we can to see who's working hard on it. And not too long ago, we started seeing someone who had gotten a fantastic reputation for her strong fight during the housing and credit crisis, all of a sudden popping up on our national radar. And we're seeing these feeds in our press and everything. And while we're tracking this, we're watching someone who's doing an affordable housing tour across their state, getting to the town halls and the fire halls that we spend time in, and listening and hearing what's needed. And affordable housing continued to come up in those roundtables. And all of a sudden, the press is talking about Senator Masto and her tour to focus on those issues for us. That's speaking directly to what we do. And then all of a sudden, there's a forceful voice against the administration's desire to make poor families pay more of their income to live in the housing that we refer to as affordable, that's provided at the federal level. Fantastic and welcome voice. And then HUD moved to suspend the fair housing rules. Absolutely unacceptable to our community. And then there was a voice, you heard it, saying that that's not okay. And that voice was coming from that big white building on the Hill. She's been fighting for millions in spending to address the issues that we're working on every day, prioritizing affordable housing vouchers for veterans. The list goes on. So then all of a sudden we're trying to tie this together, like, who is this new senator doing all this fantastic stuff? And we started looking through the record to understand that this is the same person we saw fight in Nevada during the credit crisis. And so for us housers, we knew we had a new friend in town. And that's exciting for us. And we look forward to developing our relationship with Senator Cortez Masto. One of the things that we often have that sustains our work is fantastic relationships with Capitol Hill staff. One of the very first things the senator did was hire our dear friend Carol Wyman to her staff, and we recognized, ooh, someone who does good hiring. We like that person a whole bunch. Carol's continued to be a great friend to us as well, so thank you for your work. It has been exciting for us to watch as she's started to do that work. The Marketplace Certainty Act that you've been co-sponsor of, extraordinarily dear to us, Clean Energy for America. As a fantastic steward of our federal lands, to be able to reach out and recognize the clean energy needs that we need to drive. I mean, the list goes on of the things you've been supporting. So, as an undergrad from the University of Nevada, Reno, law degree from Gonzaga, elected twice to statewide office, and now here in the Senate, we have a friend, and let's cultivate it. When Carol asked me this morning about our Nevada groups, and the list was short that we ticked off of folks that we're working with currently, both of us had kind of long faces, and we're like, oh man, you need more constituents in the room when you do one of these things for an elected official. And what both of us quickly came to is, if we don't have the resources to do capacity building across the country, we are going to continue to work hard with all of you fantastic groups from states that have a rich history in this work. That's not where we're going to spend our time. We are spending time developing new groups to do excellent work on the ground in locations that don't have enough service, that don't have enough community organizations, and are not able to use the housing programs that exist today. We got a ton of work to do across this country. A bunch of it has to do in Nevada, and I'm thrilled to introduce to you our friend, Senator Cortez Masto. Please welcome her to the stage.
Good morning. My goodness, thank you for that warm welcome. I am so pleased to be here and very excited because I'm always looking for friends in the fight for affordable housing, particularly in our rural communities. And you heard a lot of conversations about being the first. The most important thing for me about being first is now I get to be a voice at the table for those that are the most vulnerable and those that need that fight. And that's what this is about. So my voice is your voice, and that's why I'm excited to be here. I'm also excited to be here because being from Las Vegas, you very rarely hear that there was a lot of bourbon being spent last night and concern about people showing up the next morning. That's usually in a Las Vegas conference that I get. But with that said, you guys are fantastic. So let me talk a little bit about my priorities. As you've heard, I'm on 6 committees, which is banking and housing, energy, natural resources, commerce, science, transportation, Senate Indian Affairs, Special Committee on Aging, and the Senate Rules Committee. And every single one of those committees gives me the opportunity to work on the issues that are important for Nevadans that I see also are mirrored across the rest of the country, including in our rural areas. I just last month had time off, and every time that we have a week or so, I drive out into our rural communities. In Nevada, there are 17 counties. 15 of those counties are rural. Now, with that said, in Nevada, in one of our counties, you could probably fit 3 or 4 New England states. But you literally have to drive, and you're off the grid. There are times when you don't have any type of broadband or cell phone coverage, but you're getting out into these geographically challenged areas where people need services, and they need housing, right? And they need so many other things. So I spend a lot of my time there. And just recently when I was home, I did the same thing. I did my rural kind of trip through the rural communities. And one of the stops that I took was in a little community, the city of Fernley. And I hosted an affordable housing roundtable at their Fernwood Meadows Apartments. Now, this apartment complex has 28 units and is dedicated to providing affordable housing for the area's seniors and residents with disabilities in Fernley, Nevada. This is in a city of fewer than 20,000 people. Fernwood Meadows has more than 100 people on its waiting list. More than 100. And community members that I spoke to at that roundtable echoed the concerns that I have heard all across my state and my rural tour, and the same concerns that I hear from other rural communities in other states. They told me about the hardships associated with the rising cost of living, the stagnant wage growth, and a profound shortage of new affordable housing developments in their neighborhoods. They told me about the need for more federal support for infrastructure projects that could strengthen the development of their communities. It is clear the affordable housing crisis isn't just hurting those living in urban areas, it's deeply impacting our nation's rural residents. Just a little bit of statistics. Nevada has the most severe shortage of low-income housing in the country. Only 15 out of every 100 low-income families in Nevada can afford a home, and that's compared to the nationwide average of 35. For rural residents, that problem is even worse. In some Nevada counties, 1 out of every 3 homeowners or renters is paying more than 1/3 of their income on housing costs. And for rural communities, unstable healthcare markets, high transportation costs, and a lack of infrastructure investment compound the challenges associated with affordable housing. We have to do better. We have to do better here in Washington. We have to realize that investments in affordable housing are investments not only in our families, but in communities and in our economy. Washington needs to realize what Nevadans already know, what you already know, that when families own their homes, they have stability. They are less likely to experience a variety of health problems, and they can build wealth and they can thrive. And most importantly, Washington needs to recognize that the rural housing crisis doesn't exist in a vacuum. In order to safeguard rural residents' home values and to incentivize private sector investments, we have an important responsibility to guarantee that our rural communities have access to healthcare, technology, and transportation resources that are vital to every community's success. In addressing the housing crisis, I'm going to talk about some of my priorities, but as you heard, I went around the state. I did in northern Nevada a roundtable, in southern Nevada a roundtable, in Fernley a roundtable. I don't have to tell all of you. I see in my state, in our rural communities, similarly what I have seen across the country. I've been to Indiana driving through the rural communities. I've been to Ohio driving through the rural communities. I've been to Wisconsin driving to the rural communities. And there are similarly challenges. I hear it from my colleagues. Susan Collins from Maine, I sit with her on Senate Aging Affairs. I hear the same thing in the rural communities. So this is not a unique challenge that only a few senators have. We all have it. So this is the opportunity now, for me particularly sitting on banking, to gather my colleagues who have those similar challenges and say, okay, how do we prioritize it? How do we focus this? And how do we make sure the money is there and it's getting to those communities in need? I will tell you my biggest challenge when we're talking about affordable housing is how do I also incentivize builders to come into those communities? That is the biggest challenge. How do I make it pencil out for them? And those are the conversations I'm having across my state. Those are the conversations I want to have with you. That's what I need to hear. I need to know what we at the federal level should be doing to incentivize, to help, to make sure it pencils out so that we can bring those builders into our communities and we are providing that housing. So in the Senate on the Banking and Housing Committee, I actually asked to be on banking. Now, many of my colleagues run from banking, but I actually, it was my #1 priority. You don't get to pick what you want to choose as a senator. You don't get to say, I want to sit on these committees and you get it. You have to request it, and then leadership decides what committee you're going to be on. Well, my #1 was Banking and Housing and Urban Affairs for the very reasons we're talking about today, and so many others. And I got it. And I intend to stay on it for this very reason. So I was proud not only to be on it, but to then work on legislation that I'd like to talk a little bit about with you that we have done in Congress. Obviously more needs to be done, but I was proud to be part of the bipartisan spending agreement we reached in January of this year because it expanded the low-income housing tax credit by 12.5% and increased funding for the Community Development Block Grant Program and the Home Program. Now, yeah, please. What most people don't realize is I come into the Senate, and prior that is the Attorney General, but I was an assistant county manager for one of our counties, and I saw firsthand what CDBG money did into our communities. in our rural communities, our urban areas, everywhere else. And so for me, knowing the other side of that, when we allocate these funds, and if they're used efficiently and the communities are there that are going to turn that money into positive impact in their communities, we should be partnering with them and we should be fighting for that. The policy changes that we made will help to spur that development, rehabilitate and create new affordable housing stock, and support families that are struggling or who are struggling to afford a home that fits their needs. They also ensure that more than 5 million families across the United States who are currently receiving housing assistance from HUD or from the USDA's Rural Block Grant programs will continue to receive the support that keeps them out of homelessness. But we all know this isn't enough. As we end this congressional session and we look forward to the next, I will continue advocating for increases to both HUD and USDA rental housing assistance programs. Which we know combined provide nearly 800,000 units to low-income households in rural areas across our country. I am also a co-sponsor of the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act. This bipartisan bill would provide 1.3 million more affordable rental homes nationwide in the next 10 years. It would expand the low-income housing tax credit by another 50% and provide a 50% basis boost to developments that set aside 20% of units for the lowest income families. It would also provide a 30% basis boost for difficult to develop areas like our Native American communities. Now, in Nevada, there's 26 Native American communities, and I know there exist across the country as well. This is another area for me where I spend a lot of my time when I'm traveling for our rural communities. This is a challenge that we need to address in our Native American communities as well. Last year's GOP tax bill, unfortunately, it decreased the power, and this is what I heard from our housing roundtables when I was getting around to the state. It decreased the power of the low-income housing tax credit, reducing the growth of affordable housing by more than 200,000 homes over the next decade. Passing the Affordable Housing Credit Improvement Act is an important step towards providing more support for families in need. I will also continue advocating in the Senate to protect the integrity of the federal agencies like the Federal Housing Finance Agency and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and ensure they are prioritizing investments in small towns and protecting rural homeowners. In addition, I will keep fighting to ensure that government-sponsored agencies like the Federal Home Loan Bank, Fannie Mae, and Freddie Mac are held accountable to serve our rural communities. The Affordable Housing Program and the Duty to Serve requirements are important partnerships that will help us meet the housing needs of rural communities. And then directly supporting federal affordable housing programs is only half the equation. We also need to be working to ensure our rural communities have access to quality health care, reliable broadband, and transportation options. So let me talk about this a little bit, because I know our focus is on affordable housing. That is the most important priority that I see. There are a number of things that I tackle as well in our rural communities, and I know you're familiar with that. So let me just touch on this a little. Improving community assets in our small towns and rural areas, I think, will help draw those investors, create a more stable housing market, and strengthen our rural economies. That's why I have fought to protect the Affordable Care Act and Medicaid expansion. Nevada is one of those states. I have a Republican governor who created the Silver State Healthcare Exchange, who saw the benefits of expanding Medicaid and bringing insurance to more. The impact in our rural communities because of that is phenomenal. More people have access to health care in our rural communities. Our hospitals in our rural communities are thriving. That doesn't mean that we don't need to do more, but this is a start, and this is worth that fight. Strengthening that Affordable Care Act will help rural hospitals keep their doors open. It will bring revenue to our communities and ensure that people aren't forced to leave their hometowns in order to be closer to medical care. Do you know, if you live in Elko, Nevada, which is the northeast part of Nevada, It's a 4-hour drive to Reno or a 4-hour drive to Salt Lake. And that's what those residents have to do each time they need health care. They have to make that decision where they're going to go. And so this is an issue for me that I think many of us see in our communities that we continue to need to fight for. Along with that, last year, I introduced a bipartisan bill, a number of them with my colleagues, to address and bring and fight for a rural broadband. Now, I have a college roommate who I've known since kindergarten. That's Nevada, small town still. And she lives in Elko, Nevada. And she's got a beautiful family, 2 kids. And she told me that every time they want to watch a movie and stream it over Netflix, they have to get off the internet because there's not enough broadband, there's not enough service to get them to be able to watch a movie and do other things on the internet at the same time. Now that's just crazy, crazy. But think about this. If we made that investment in rural broadband, if we brought and connected our rural communities, not only would we make those connections for those families so that they can enjoy their entertainment, but we bring telehealth, we bring e-education, we bring so many different services that they are lacking right now, which improves our rural communities and invites that investment and more people coming and willing to come and live in those communities and invest in those communities. That's why I worked on 2 bills to really address this issue in our rural communities. One of them I introduced with North Carolina's Republican Senator Richard Burr, and it's the Moving First Act to create opportunities for more communities to compete for federal money to fund efficient, creative, and innovative technology projects in our rural communities along with our urban areas. The Moving First Act specifically sets aside $20 million in federal grants for rural communities to use to improve transportation services, telecommunication access partnerships, and create economic growth. I'm also the proud co-sponsor of the SPEED Act with my colleague, Senator Roger Wicker from Mississippi. This bill would promote the development of new broadband infrastructure by streamlining the permitting process for new telecommunications equipment. These initiatives will help spur that development that we talked about. It would create good paying jobs in our small towns, giving our rural communities the solid foundation they need to help tackle the affordable housing crisis. My colleagues and I have also worked very hard to make sure that we're setting aside the funds for that investment in rural broadband. Together, we secured more than $10 billion for new infrastructure projects across the country, including more than $2.5 billion for the Federal Highway Administration, $1 billion for new rail and transit funding, and $600 million in new support to expand broadband access through the USDA. So let me just end by saying this. The one thing I found here in Washington which really has an impact is all of you. By coming knocking on our doors, by sitting down with us, by sending the emails, by communicating, whether we're here in Washington or we're in your states, it does make a difference. That outreach is key for us to know what is happening in our communities so that we can continue to fight at a federal level for the funds that you may need, for the incentives that you may need to support your communities. Without it, we can't be your voices. Now, with that said, I do represent Nevada, but I promise you this. I will be your voice as well, whatever state you come from. If you come sit and knock on my door and come into my conference room and have a conversation with Carol, who is fantastic, and anybody else, I have an open door policy. If you have ideas about what we can do to spur this development and address the affordable housing crisis that we see in this country, particularly in our rural areas, come sit and talk with me. I promise I would be your voice as well. So thank you. Thank you for being here today.
Okay, that was awesome. So, Senator, thank you so much for joining us, for raising tribal and other issues that we work on so regularly. You're generous with your time, and we appreciate your friendship. I know you got to hurry back to your committee meeting. Have a great day. We'll see you soon. All right, everybody pull out your smartphone. Uh-huh. What do you people, do you have a flip phone over there? Pull that thing out. Come on. Now show me where the app is. Go on. Open it up, show me the app. Yep, you get extra points. Gold star back there, thank you. All right, just checking. Just checking. Who's winning at Click? Shantaria. Something seems rigged. Last time I looked, it was Andrea Hively from USDA. Uh-huh, there she is right there. Click Master. And that's not just because USDA was a fantastic and generous sponsor to this year's conference. All right, so now we have a super special treat. I know you guys have seen some of these presentations. Lance George has been working on some new material. He's going to bring up and share with us. Lance is our Research and Information Director at HAC. I got to read these things. So 7% of all rural households lack any type of broadband subscription, compared to 17.1% of metropolitan households. This amounts to more than 4.7 million rural households with a broadband internet subscription. Look, that's actually pulling out extraordinary data, putting it in terms that has an impact on the conversation in this town. We publish a ton of good stuff. Our materials look great when you open them, and they're fantastic on the coffee table, but I know when you get the HAC news and our reports, you're able to shape the conversations in your communities as well. We did a report on the mortgage interest deduction. Low mortgage deduction claim rates, under 10% of tax returns claiming the deduction, were found at almost half, 45% of all rural communities, compared to 8% in suburban and urban. It's this fantastic tool, right? Anybody take a mortgage interest deduction? Anybody in the room? Come on, you can put your hands up. In an urban setting right here, you would see an entire room of folks that benefit by that production program to put housing ownership on top and to build wealth in that way. It's not okay that our communities can't benefit from a program like that. And there's no way to have that conversation in this town unless you get the kind of research and the way that Lance and his team are able to shape the conversation. We put it out there that, yeah, it's this great tool, we love it. But look, it's not touching our communities. The level of incomes and the wealth accumulated there doesn't allow us to access that program. Put your policy through a rural lens, and let's see how it plays out on the ground. Lance is able to do that for all of us in our community. So Lance has, we were sitting in the back room the other day, and what did you count up? 20 years and 2 days now on staff at HAC. He had a start at Frontier Housing in Kentucky. Shout out for Frontier, Tom, we got you. On our board, Tom Manning Bevan, their new executive director, is also on HAC's board. Fantastic organization. And when Lance came here 20 some odd years ago, well, he looked the same. He looks great, doesn't he? I really appreciate that. A loving father of 2 kids, a fantastic husband, and a great friend of all of ours, Lance George.
Thanks, David. So I'm going to make David do the presentation with me. But no, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes before we barrage you with our kind of usual statistics and maps and graphs and charts, and take this opportunity, quite frankly, to thank David. He's done an amazing he's, as was noted yesterday, he's kind of filled the shoes of giants. We're a rowdy group at HAC. We don't show it here. We're really in line, but keeping us in order. So he's been here a year. The hazing is officially over, right? So this is the end. So David's a Hackster. Events like this make me really proud to be a Hackster. David's now a Hackster. He was a Hackster before he came to HAC. He didn't know that, but he was. But again, I'm really proud to be a Hackster. We do amazing work, and so I really like to have everyone thank all the HAC staff, because he's right. Yeah. So David gave just a small sampling of the work that they do, but they really do the amazing amount of work in the research, but in all the company-wide, division-wide. And I'm proud to be a Hackster, but I'm more proud to be part of this community, quite frankly. I sit cloistered in a Washington D.C. office in front of a computer, and hearing and interacting with you. And we know you're doing this amazing work, but having this opportunity to interact with you, see the innovative and amazing work that you're doing, oftentimes in difficult circumstances and limited resources, it's awe-inspiring. So I just wanted to take that opportunity to say that. So thank you very much.
Can I go, Paul?
You can go now. This part of the hazing is over. I should have, while I was making those remarks, try to get set up here, because I am nothing without a map or a graphic, right? You all know that. So maybe if we could shift to the presentation. We just wanted to take this opportunity, quite frankly, to share with you a couple of data points, and these aren't, we call them ruralities. Some of you have seen them before. They're really small. They're pretty basic. They're actually just infographics. I think some of you may be similar to me, but I know I sit at my desk and kind of deal with the piles on the desk and thinking about all the minutia of that work and the small things. And from time to time, it's good just to step back for a second or two and think about the broad picture. These are really, really basic data points, but they're intended almost food for thought. Hopefully you can take some of these. We have many of them. I'm just going to present 5 of them to you today, pretty random, what we call ruralities, to look at, or again, food for thought in your day-to-day work. We're stepping back and say, how does this interact at a really large level, quite frankly? I'll start out. This is just the opening slide, really basic. And I'll have to say, in addition to that, I've made a career basically of walking into rooms and telling people the problems and then leaving, quite frankly. I'm big on problems and short on strategies. We don't really do this with ruralities, but I'm going to try to interject a few areas where, quite frankly, thinking about that, some of the policies and the strategies, quite frankly, and that go along with some of these, not just the problem, but some of those strategies. And we want to hear your ruralities. That's why we're doing this, to hear your ruralities, so we want to hear that. This was really just an opening slide. I often have this rurality for organizations, or we are often the rural voice in the room, as David noted, and other Hacksters noted. And many people don't understand rural conditions and rural dynamics. And we're the rural face in the room. So I often have this one, but I was impressed by the senator's remarks about a 4-hour commute from here to there. The colors don't show up well here on this map, but the bluer areas are urban areas, and everything in between are rural communities or rural areas. And you'll see that oftentimes in our business, we work in kind of a business of scale and standardization, and we have very large scale and not a lot of standardization. So that hinders us, but it was out of pure coincidence. I have this, we calculated the number. If you took every housing unit in rural America and you gave it an average size lot and an average apartment size, they would neatly fit, and it's pure coincidence that the senator was here today. It was, but they would absolutely, I found a state where they would almost neatly fit within the state of Nevada. But that illustrates that trend of the scale and the standardization that we deal with, and many people don't understand. So it takes a few seconds for some of these to load. We're all housers in the room, or most of our housers, but we do other things. I have to say, one of the largest housing challenges, in my estimation, is not a housing challenge at all, quite frankly. And it's just one, but it's not directly related to housing, it's indirectly related to housing. And those are just underlying demographics and the vitality of many rural communities. So in many rural communities, and many of you know this, you've experienced an out-migration of younger and working age populations. that have really hollowed out these communities. And this is a massive demographic trend that will really impact the vitality of communities. And I think it's an underlying issue that many of you are dealing with. To help illustrate that, this is a map in 1980 of that younger working age population, age 18 to 35. And all of the green counties here are areas where 25% of that county's population was age 18 to 35 in 1980. And you'll notice if we swipe over to today, or nearly today, you'll see this dramatic trend where you've seen that out-migration really illustrated in this dynamic, where younger people have gravitated to urban areas, quite frankly. So a really graphic illustration of that. I work in the domain of statistics and really try to avoid, it's almost antithetical to our work. We're supposed to stay away from anecdotes and personal interactions. But sometimes I look at these data and I think, and I was running these analyses and thinking, wow, I can see this as well. David noted some of his upbringing or his rearing in small town communities. I grew up in a small rural community in eastern Kentucky, grew up on a tobacco farm. I had 5 siblings. We were all very fortunate, I think, and successful, mostly due to our parents, to each of us get a college degree. How many of us do you think out of those 5 live within 100 miles of that rural community now? 0. So that's the data point here. That illustrates, I think that's, again, a personal anecdote, but it really illustrates that point to me. It brings it home to me, that data point. And I'm not a demographer, but I will tell you, these type of trends will have reciprocal events or have massive impacts future generations, quite frankly. So I know there are a lot of issues, there are a lot of strategies. I could come back, I don't have a great strategy for this other than I'm really excited about some of the interest around creative placemaking and communities. I would say, I would come back to what Moises said yesterday. There are a lot of different communities working on this, but this is a problem that will absolutely be solved at the community level. Communities know what they need, it has to be solved there. A second, just very basic reality is that a home is a home. And so no matter what type of housing unit that you live in is a home. In rural communities, manufactured housing is an extremely important source of housing. It's nationwide, but particularly in rural communities. The concentration of manufactured homes is about twice that nationwide. And you'll just see this is another graphic illustration of the importance of that data point. So in 1970, all of the yellow-colored counties had more than 7% of their occupied stock were manufactured homes. But you look to today, and you'll see the importance of that stock in our world, quite frankly. But in many respects, the residents of this type of housing kind of live in another world. The home is not really a home for them, treated in very different ways. I know there are a lot of innovative strategies that are working to help ensure that residents of manufactured homes have equal protection to those who have conventional homes. So that's a big issue. It's, again, just a small rurality, but just to show you that trend point. A third is, and this is, I'm trying to put a positive slant on some of these, and quite frankly, I do think this is very positive. And I think it's something that the Housing Assistance Council was predicated on in its inception. What it was built to do was eliminate substandard housing. We've gone back and looked at some of the original documents, and many of you who have a long history in this world know this. This is what HAC was founded to do, and the work that we do. And there's been great strides in this. I think a lot of these ruralities sometimes have a more negative trajectory or a negative slant, but I think this is a good opportunity to show a positive trajectory, particularly, and great thanks to many people in this room, quite frankly. But one indicator of substandard housing, we don't have a really good grasp on it. The indicators are not great, but it's just the lack of adequate plumbing. So in 1970, this map illustrates all the counties in purple would have more than 2.5% of their housing units lacking adequate plumbing. If we fast forward to today, we see dramatic reductions, right? So I think many of you deserve a lot of credit for this trajectory. We're not still there, quite frankly. You still see extreme areas of purple in various various areas of the United States. And I would say, just to step back, in many respects, some of the issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis feel intractable, right? Largely because this country hasn't invested the resources to address them, but they really do. There's only about 250,000 of these units left in the United States. Similar to the public health domain, this is a problem we can eradicate. We can solve this problem, quite frankly. So I would challenge you to think about ways to eliminate this problem and just solve it for once. So I want to come back here. Hopefully, I doubt I'll be here in 20 years. I've been here 20 years and 2 days. I would love to be back in 20 more years and make it 40 years and 2 days. But I would love, even in the next 10 years, to swipe this map over and have no purple, quite frankly. And I do think that is an achievable goal. On the same side, we really do need to focus on these areas. There's another, I think, issue that has percolated up that is very hard to quantify, and our analysts are looking at it. And it's a concept that I would call, and I should have put in another rurality slide, what we call habitable but not marketable. So a home that just gets above this threshold of being substandard, but it's really dilapidated, right? You see this, you drive through small town communities and you see the stock really diminishing. And the homes are habitable, but they're not really marketable. So that's the next stage of this. We're really looking at that concept of habitable but not marketable. We would like to hear from you about how to quantify that, or hear if that's happening in your communities, quite frankly. I used to, when I first started, I would say, substandard housing is the largest housing challenge in rural communities, and we would put a lot of focus and effort on that. And it was definitely a problem. But I went back and looked at the data, and I was wrong, as I often am, quite frankly. But the affordability problem has always been, the inability to afford a house has always been the largest problem in the nation. And it's always been the problem, or since 1940, as far back as we can go and analyze. In rural communities as well, just it's not as pronounced. And many people think, when you talk to them that aren't as familiar in a rural context, they think that substandard housing or other issues, it's not affordability. And affordability is by far the largest housing challenge in our nation. And it's more pronounced now in rural communities. Not as severe as in urban communities, but more pronounced. So just as, again, another quick rurality, a graphic illustration of this, all of the counties in red or orange had more than 1/4 of their housing stock housing cost burdened. You're all housers, you know what that is. People are paying way too much for their housing, quite frankly, right? So this was in 1980. And if we fast forward, this is the occurrence of housing cost burden nationwide, right? And you see a lot of red where it's gotten extreme. So this is by far the largest housing challenge that we're dealing with today. And again, this is one where I don't know if I have a lot of solutions. It is, quite frankly, a very simple ratio. It's your income over housing cost. And incomes in this country have been very stagnant, particularly in rural communities. That's what's driving a lot of this, quite frankly. So we need more economic development, more economic vitality in communities. That's what's really going to address this particular issue. And as a quick segue into that, this is some work that we have done in what we would call the next challenge. And it's a particular subset of that, because a lot of that orange and red area is heavily concentrated among renters. They are the ones who have the greatest affordability challenges. One amazing resource for rural renters is the USDA Section 515 housing stock. I know there's a really robust group here who are working on this, but as many of you know, that is a finite resource. We haven't developed any of that new housing for some time. Other affordable housing, rural multifamily housing provisions don't work as well in many communities, so it's a very finite resource. And it's what I would call a diminishing resource. I wanted to put some time series lapse on here, but the computer wouldn't allow me this morning. But a lot of these stock, there's over 13,000 properties across, and there's one property in at least almost 90% of U.S. counties have one of these properties. Extremely important to the residents. The residents who live in these properties are among the most vulnerable residents in the United States. They have an average income of about $13,000, and 2/3 of them are either elderly or disabled. But this stock is going to rapidly diminish. It's going to go offline. Basically, within the next 40 years, if I'm here the next 20 years, there will be a lot of those. So we need to work. I know there's a really robust group working on this issue right now, and that gives me a lot of encouragement. But yet, this is the next major challenge, and it's a subset of that larger affordability challenge, because if you lose these properties in these communities, you're going to have a much more severe crisis. There's really no place for some of these tenants to go, quite frankly. We encourage you to look at our recent report. Again, amazing work done by our research team. 2 130-page reports on this issue. I haven't read them myself, all of them. I've tried, but really amazing detailed work on this. It's one data point to help inform the policies and strategies, but this is a major issue that we need to tackle. And I know there's a really robust group in here working on this. And again, I told you these would be quick, but I would just like to reiterate, one, we want to hear your rurality. Tell us what's going on, things that we should be looking at. And secondly, this is why HAC's here. We have resources. We have something called the Rural Data Portal. We're actually updating it. Hopefully we can have a more robust version of this platform, quite frankly. But we are demoing the Rural Data Portal. How many people, just as an unscientific poll, have used the Rural Data Portal or accessed it? Wonderful. That's very reassuring. It's a resource that we put together. Our team works really hard. They crunch the data up into the wee hours of the night. We try to make it the most recent data and make it usable and accessible, quite frankly. That's what we have a data shop for, is to make information for you, quite frankly. So we're demoing it out in the exhibit hall. Feel free to stop by if you want to learn more about how to use it or what some of the resources entail. And so I really would like to just thank all of you. It's really inspiring and encouraged to work with you. And we want to hear from you, quite frankly. So thank you very much.
That was awesome. I love the audible moans and groans when the thing slides across the map. And that's positive reinforcement for a researcher like Lance, right? Hey, that's important to be able to draw those things out. I told you, he can find the truth in the numbers and give it to the rest of us in a way that we can advocate for things that are not okay today and that we can change for tomorrow. We can solve this, Lance and everybody. We're doing great work. Some of those numbers that got better, especially on the availability of potable water, is because of the work that's been going on here for generations. Folks, we need a new generation to follow us. We do need to be concentrating on building organizations on the ground that are going to be here when Lance is still here in 20 more years and 2 days. And I'm handing it off to some young punk on stage who's very quiet and all that, Connie. Okay, look, so we got a fantastic day ahead of us. Who has bought a raffle ticket for the quilt? Aw. I bought tickets. The more hands, isn't that the way stats work, Lance? The more hands that go up, the less chance I have of winning. Have you seen these things? They're amazing. And the best part about it is hack matches, every dollar that you put in, and all of it goes back to the charities selected by Ogallala Sioux. This is a fantastic resource. We've been doing it forever. The quilts are gorgeous. We do have one or two that somehow in the hack office is starting to migrate its way to the back near my office, but that's okay. They'll let me buy more raffle tickets, I'm sure of it. We also have prizes for all of you beyond Andrea who are winning at Click. You're taking pictures, you're putting them up. We use those pictures. It's sneaky, I know, but now you're providing us visual content as well for a fantastic and exciting conference. You'll get big fat prizes if you're winning at Click. So pull that app back out and play, please. Okay. See, I should be playing because I don't even know how it works. You can't win either. All right. I also want to say we tried a new thing this year with our unconference sessions, and it was a huge hit yesterday. A ton of people went to the board, said, what is not here that I need a session to talk about? They put those ideas on the board, and then they went and found some of the rest of you and brought you in the room and had conversations that we smarty pants folks on staff here think we could line up all the right panels. You brought many of those to our attention. We have rooms to accomplish that. You used them heavily yesterday. I would love to strongly encourage you to continue to do that today. You can thank Dan Stern, who just stood up. Oh, yeah, and it runs up on the slides here where we can do voting. See how our AV stuff is. Always do these kind of AV things on the fly. They work perfectly every time. So as that pulls up, I also want to say, folks, be on time. Now, I've never been on time to anything in my whole life. And staff can tell you that. I'm always racing in. Yeah, I hear you. I'm doing better. I'm trying. But tonight, you got to be in the room by 6:30. You got to be here by 6:30. 6, sorry. See? I told you. It's just like at home. All right, reel that back. 6 o'clock, you have to be in the room by 6 o'clock. We have a guest whose every single word that he utters in public is recorded by thousands of journalists and reported out and dissected. He's the one person, well, there used to be 2 people in town whose every word was parsed out. We're down to 1, but this guy, the chairman of the Federal Reserve Board, Jerome Powell, is one of the single most powerful folks in the nation. The words he utters shift the markets that we work in. It is extraordinary that little old hack has now been forming a strong partnership with the Federal Reserve Board. This is amazing. The resources that these folks command to be able to understand the markets we work in are extraordinary. Their chairman is coming here to talk to you tonight. It is beyond thrilling for me. I hope you join me in that thrill. And be here at 6 o'clock because he's going to race in, say like 11 of the most important words we're going to hear all year. I'm sure somebody like Lance can understand and explain it to us Friday morning. And we'll get a chance to be able to say hey to him as all of us say hey to each other and have a great day at this conference. Things are looking up. We're having fun. Thank you.